Finesse yet boldness. This unlikely combination is where the true worth of Mukai Teiyao's pitching is. Let's get into it. Hey everyone, Bruce, just regular D anime here. I hope you're doing well. I am, because I get to talk about an interesting pitcher from my favorite series, Diamond No Ace, Mukai Teiyo, the Trickster of Tokyo and the Ace of Taito High School. And I'm doing a few discussions on the pitchers of Tokyo. We had the panel where it was the four pitchers of Tokyo, the four monsters, specifically the monster of Tokyo, Furia, the king, Noramune, and Kosei, and the trickster Mukai Tail, the subject of today's video. I'm sorry I forget Kosei's epitaph. I think it's just Ace or the Genius. The Genius of Tokyo, I believe, was Kosei's epitaph. But today we're talking about Mukai Tail, the trickster of Tokyo, the one who is the sidearm pitcher, the southpaw, who uses the 3D box to take out people in the strike zone with his tricky pitching and his great control. One of his great, if not his greatest weapon, the control he has. But before we get into that, let's get into a little bit about Mukai Teiyo. Mukai is somebody, as his epitaph, the trickster, denotes. He's very childish. He's often seen sticking his tongue out and making being childish and chiding people and making cracks that the other team can hear. He's like, oh look, they look like delinquents over there. He's kind of like the guy who goes people on. He's the trash talker. But aside from that, beneath that is somebody who's very confident and someone who works really hard. So he's the kind of guy who will talk a big game, but just as easily back that game up. So we see that he is not someone who, talks a big game and then he gets hit off the first inning. No, he is someone very much worthy of being ranked with those three other pitchers I mentioned in the Tokyo region. And, as of the most recent chapters, Saramura as well. So now there's 5 pitchers to look out for. Maybe 6 if you count Sonata, but we know what he's going on with him. But I'm talking about the 4 major ones. He's very much worth being ranked with those heavy hitters because his pitching style is one that emphasizes great control. So he's a tricky. I'm gonna say that word like 9,000 times. Trickster, tricky. I'm just gonna keep saying it. So get used to it. But he's someone who is very childish. He goads a lot, but he's also very confident in himself and not. So weirdly enough, he's arrogant, but it's something it's not that I am so great kind of thing. It's, how do I put it? He said he's like, this ace of the generation is me. He's somebody who's very passionate, right? It's confidence in a passionate sense, not somebody who just walks around saying stuff. It's somebody who says, if you don't believe that I'm the best, how about I just show you, right? He's someone who's very willing to put the money where his mouth is, right? That's what I've been trying to say. He's somebody who's willing to put the chips on the line, put the money on the table to show you why, if you didn't pick him, you should have, and if you picked him, it's a safe bet. You're good. So that's kind of his personality. He's someone who's very just childish. He goes, trash talks, but I appreciate Mukai because he's very confident. There's a quote in one of the episodes where he's training and he says, I have a confidence in my chest I cannot explain, and I bolster and feed it by working harder than anyone else. See, now that's something I can get behind. That's a character I can support. Maybe you might be tricky, you might be childish, but if I see you working hard, I can't help but support you, especially if I was his teammate or as maybe just as a fan of the series. I can't help but root for the guy just because he does back up his words. He is somebody who works hard. He doesn't use dirty plays, except if you count, maybe throwing the ball at too close to a batter's head like he did with Koromochi. If you count that, maybe he needs to work on that. But other than that, he doesn't injure other players. He doesn't purposefully do something that's cheating. He just uses the full breadth of the batting box and uses his control to the fullest effect. He's somebody who very much puts his money where his mouth is, and I appreciate that. As a personality, I like Mukai. But onto his pitching style. I've mentioned it before about his control, right? His pitching style makes use of good control, even great control. I think the official guidebook lists him behind Yu Sushin, as like the best control in the series. And because of that, it's kind of like Saramura, who he makes uses of corners in baseball. So when you do that, you kind of have control over what the batter's doing, and you rarely get hit off of And speaking purely from a baseball standpoint, when you make use of corners really well, you kind of put the batter in a position where if he does get a hit off you, it's not going to be a long hit. And if he can't hit you, you're obviously going to strike him out. You're going to make use of balls and of the strike zone. So he is someone specifically in the series that stated he doesn't believe the he's not someone who just simply believes that the batter's box is 9 zones. It's also 3 dimensional. It goes basically like if this is the point, it goes like this, and then there's the batter's box, right? If the batter's standing right here, the box is 3 dimensional. So it begins really, his strike zone in his mind begins earlier than what the batter really realizes. And until they kind of realize what the pitch is going, he already has something, a strike, or he has them swinging. I mean, I should clarify, a strike with no swing or a swinging strikeout, to clarify. That sounded redundant, but that's what I mean. He uses the full breadth of the strike zone to make use of his great control, because he's not. I think the guidebook lists that his speed isn't the best, but since he can use control like Sawamura, he's also a lefty. He can get pitchers out that way by making them swing and not throwing a lot of meatballs. He's not somebody who throws a lot of easy pitches to hit off of, and it lists that if you do get a hit off him, you're probably going to get jammed, especially if it's a low pitch. Again, using those corners. So if you do that, you're not going to get very far on base. So if you do get on base, you're not really going to get an RBI. Probably the next guy after you's probably not going to get an RBI, just because he's so good at striking people out, and he finishes with a breaking ball. So if you do get used to his timing and the corners, the breaking ball can make you swing and get you out. So there is a reason why with his pitching style that he is stacked up with those 3 other monsters in the Tokyo region. And also, it should be noted, he is obviously a sidearm thrower like Kawakami, like Nori Senpai, but it's his energy is really different from Nori's. He feels a lot colder, a little more pompous, obviously, than Nori, but like I said, he backs it up. So it's interesting that we have a sidearm thrower, a lefty, but somebody who's really similar to pitchers in Sato's lineup, but attitude-wise is completely different. I think that was kind of on purpose from TJ Sensei, how he was making and designing Mukai. He kind of took bits and pieces from what we like from Sato's pitchers, but flipped the script on his personality. So I find that really interesting. One skill I should mention with his pitching style is that he utilizes a screwball, which is a pitch that breaks away from the zone, and it's like a reverse changeup almost. It has a horizontal break. And we see him utilize that against opposite-handed batters, because it goes in the opposite direction of your dominant arm. So if I read that correctly, it breaks in the direction of the pitcher's dominant arm. Ugh. Right, it breaks in the direction of the batter's dominant arm. So he utilizes that as kind of his main, like, I guess iconic pitch would be the best word for it. That's kind of his skill that he puts on display. Just thought I'd mention that in his pitching style. Moving on to his battery, we do know his partner somewhat well, Inui, who is his catcher, obviously. And when we first meet them, Inui likes to, when we first meet him till now, every appearance, he likes to make use of the, especially in the anime, the use of lightning striking, right? He feels like when he caught his first pitch, he felt lightning strike him. It felt like he was getting, he felt thunder, right? It's a common phrase from him to describe things that really interest him or catch him by surprise or he thinks are amazing. And he obviously describes Mukai's pitches as such when he first catches them in his mitt. And we don't really see Inui, as far as I can tell, scold Mukai. I think that's an interesting kind of dichotomy, especially because Mukai's younger than Inui, if I'm correct. Kengo Inui is a year above Mukai, so he kind of directs him and leads him, but you don't often see him really chastise what Mukai says. Normally, there was a moment when Mukai, and it's a bit of trivia here real quick, they both, according to TJ Sensei's Twitter, they both obsess sort of over their good skincare. So, like, Mukai obviously cares about his looks. And I think Mukai comments on somebody, I can't remember who it was, but he's like, I can't stand how that good-looking childish kid, I think he was talking about May, if I'm remembering, he's talking about May, and he's like, I can't stand that childish, good-looking, pompous brat, or something like that. And you just see Kengo like turn toward him and just lightning strike behind him. Doesn't say anything though. That's a real funny moment for me. It's just him going like, I'm not gonna say anything. Never mind. Like that's what he's thinking. He's like, I'm gonna leave it anyway. But yeah, that is who his battery's with. Like I said, TJ Sensei, they prioritize good skincare. Inui leads him, but he doesn't necessarily chastise him. He lets him be who he is because he recognizes the extreme talent that Mukai has. That trickster persona is something that can stand up against other teams in the nation. So it's no wonder he keeps his ace. We know, right, as a catcher, you need to keep your ace happy. So I imagine that's why he doesn't chastise him too much for the things he says. He knows Mukai will deliver on the mound. So that's a little bit about the battery. We know the only one we don't really know about along the four that I listed is really Ichidai Third's catcher. We don't really know Kosei's catcher that well. I don't really recall any segments with him specifically. We know more about his batters, but anyway, that's not about him. This video's not about him. It's not about Kosei. We'll get there. We'll get to Kosei. But for now, Inui is one of the three catchers of those four I mentioned that we know about, that we see, and he also was a part of the Tokyo kind of national team thing that went on the Invitational against the Americans, but I could make another video on, a separate video on Kengo and Inui. Kengo Inui. Duh. Alright. I could make a video on him, which I probably will make a video more on just catchers in general. I feel like that'd be a good video, but that's for another time. But that's a little bit about their battery. It's really simple. It's just Mukai leads him, but he does not chastise him. He supports Mukai in whatever he does. So, in terms of his role in the story, Mukai is somebody who we see face off against Sato twice, and he has a match against Inashiro where he does fight Norimiya Mei. So those are the three times we really see him in a match. And the first time, remember, we see him face off against Furia in the rain, and that's the game where Furia was literally on fire until the rain came down and kind of cooled him off, literally and figuratively. Mostly figuratively. It kind of shut down his rhythm he had going. And after that, we see that, during that match, once Furia cools off and gets out and the game resumes, Sato does eventually win. But an interesting thing about that match is that Mukai knows Tojo, and remember Tojo was a pitcher in middle school, and Tojo kind of obviously he went to fielder, and Mukai kind of chastises Tojo for letting outsiders like Saramura and Furia take the mound from him because he wanted to face off against his rival from middle school again. And that's kind of an interesting bit in the first match we see where they square off, where he squares off with Tojo and he wanted him to be a pitcher, and we know Tojo hasn't given up, but yeah, that's an interesting bit we learn about them, is that he knows Tojo and that he wanted to face off against him in the first match. Now, the next match, actually, there's two more matches, there's two more matches I forgot to mention with Taito High School. In Act 1, they do face off against Sato, but in Act 2, we see him in the spring tournament. They actually face off against Seiko, Ugamori High, and then Industrial Baseball Team. So they actually have three matches within the story of Act 2 that I thought they only had the one, actually, but I wanted to correct myself there. So I remember when he was facing Ugamori, he was the one chastising them about their looks, about being delinquents and stuff like that. He's like, what is this, rookies? Which is another series I will talk about, make a video about. It's a very, very good series, but it's like half delinquent manga, half baseball. It's kind of a mix, but great series nonetheless. Glad I was referenced. TJ Sensei knows his stuff. Anyway, in his match against Inashiro against Norimiya Mei, the match, Mei takes it, but you can see what I love about the match real quick is that since they're both childish people, right? They're sore losers. They're like being held back by their like respective catchers, and they're like, yeah, like I'm gonna beat you next time. But yeah, whatever. You a child? Yeah, but you're a worse one. Like they're talking crap to each other while they're being like held back by their catchers. But it's one of my favorite moments for the pitchers overall in the series. I love seeing them banter at each other, and that's probably my favorite banter. It's just them like walking away, being like, "Well, I'll get you next time." No, no, you won't. And they're like supposed to be like high school aces. I don't know. It's one of my favorite moments, and you know that was actually a good match as well. So that's a little about his role in the story. To get back onto the topic, I think role might be the wrong word, but he's someone who kind of represents using great control in baseball. He's somebody who's kind of the pinnacle of not overpowering someone, but making use of well placed strikes and not making mistakes. I think that's another big one because again, I mentioned that he does not throw a lot of meatballs, and he jams batters. So he's someone who makes use of. He waits for you to make a mistake, for you to get yourself out, and he keeps his mistakes low and his control high. So he's someone who really is kind of a pinnacle in the sense that, if you're caught up with, obviously if you're here, I hope you're caught up with the manga, but if you're not, he's someone that Sawamura, I think, in my opinion, obviously replaces, but he's someone who Sawamura should respect and kind of aim for as somebody who wants good control in their pitches and to make use of things like breaking balls and keep mistakes low. That's an issue Sawamura has had, but in that respect, I think Mukai is somebody you should aim for if you are a left-handed batter. If you are a sidearm, did I say batter? Didn't mean that, pitcher. He is someone, especially for Kawakami, even though Kawakami is older than he is, it's somebody, if you're a sidearm pitcher, you should aim to be like Mukai. So he's kind of the pinnacle of control and left-armed pitchers in this series. So that's sort of his role, right? Aside from that, just a little bit of random trivia taken from the official guidebook. His favorite food is like snack food, like junk food. His best subject in school is math, and his hobbies include playing games, especially like dating simulators, which I find kind of funny. I like that little touch, but that's just a little bit of trivia I thought I'd throw at you for you at the end of this video. But that's all I have for you today on Mukai TAIYOU, the Trickster of Tokyo. If you liked the video, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button for more Diamond Ace content, guys. I'd really appreciate it. But until next time, later.